Jessica Strickland at the Wayne County Cooperative Extension Office, and today we're going to talk about pruning grapevines. In eastern North Carolina, we're usually talking about muscadine grapes. Muscadines are native to our area. They're a great fruit to grow because they have very little pest problems. They're native to eastern North Carolina, and the major job though is pruning. And we're out here in early February. That's usually the time people start looking at pruning. Some start in January, but we can look at January into February to prune our grapevines. When we're looking at pruning muscadine grapes, what we're looking for is, if you have a trellis along the wires, your arms, from those arms we have what are called fruiting spurs. And those fruiting spurs is where the new growth is going to come from. And our new growth on muscadine grapes is going to come from this year's growth. Because with muscadines, this year's growth is going to come from the buds of last year's growth. We want to make sure that we follow last year's growth. Usually last year's growth will be more of a light tan color wood, where the older growth from past years will be darker wood. So we're going to follow this back to where we can find the buds, and we want to keep a couple of buds per each spur that's coming off of this arm. From those two buds, that's going to be your new shoots for this year's growth, and that's where your fruit production is going to come from. So you're actually going to cut off, you can see here with this one, we'll cut off a lot of growth, and that's perfectly fine to cut off a lot of that extra growth. But you just want to make sure that you keep a couple, 1 to 2 buds from last year's growth, and because that's where the new growth is going to come from. If you cut too far in, then you're going to lose those buds and lose that growth and so a lot of your fruit production for this year. So to make this cut, all you need is hand pruners for it. We'll follow this back, and you can see in there where you see a couple of the buds, and make the cut there. And what you're left with is what a lot of people refer to as fruiting spurs. And these fruiting spurs, as you get each year, you're going out just a little farther because of course you're keeping a little bit of each year's growth. So these fruiting spurs over time get a little longer each year. If they do get to where they're too long, or you have too many that's gathered too closely and you want to space them out so that way you get sunlight, you can get better fruit quality, you're usually looking at these fruiting spurs about hand width apart, and that way those spurs are going to be spaced out along this arm, and that's going to allow for more sunlight to penetrate, some air circulation, but also just better fruit production in general. So you can take out the whole fruiting spur from time to time if there's just too many, or if it seems like it's getting too far out because it's got several years worth of growth, to kind of start that over. Also, if you as you get more familiar with it, counting 1 or 2 buds, you can count those buds, but eventually as you get the hang of it and you get comfortable with it, you don't have to sit and count every single bud. Instead, you can make your cuts, or you can even go and cut out some of this lot of growth that's out from the vine, then go in and clean it up more down to those 1 or 2 buds as you make those cuts. As you make these cuts, one common question that comes up quite a bit is people asked about when they notice they're making cuts, they start to see sap or bleeding out of the vines where those cuts were made. That's perfectly fine. Waiting later won't necessarily cause that to slow down, and it's not going to do any damage to the plant. So don't worry if you see any sap that's coming or dripping from the cuts that you make. Once again, we're out here that it's in February. Depending on how many grapevines you have to prune, some people start in January, but you want to finish up before you start getting new growth, which could be sometime in March, just depends on the weather. So you want to finish up your pruning chores by then. And that's everything as far as how to prune muscadine grapes. For more information, you can contact the Wayne County Extension Service at 919-731-1520.